The sustainable city. How do we design it? Over half of the world's population is now urbanized. As resources dwindle, it is becoming increasingly difficult and costly to feed our urban populations. At the same time, growing cities generate ever-increasing mounds of solid waste. In many cities in the developing world, almost half of this is organic matter. An alternative to conventional solid waste management is the concept known as closing the nutrient loop, recapturing nutrients from organic solid waste through composting for use in urban agriculture. Using waste for local food production, right where people live. It seems like an obvious concept, but how do we design for it? Planners may plan, designers may design, but the city is largely shaped by hundreds of choices made repeatedly, every day, by the people who live and work there. So how can we encourage a shift towards more sustainable choices? Good urban design recognizes that the designed environment works better if the people affected by it are actively involved in its creation and management.
Solid waste action sa Katilingban.
And lessons from participatory research have shown that the community derives significant benefits from the internal participatory process. This project explored how tools from participatory research, specifically the approach known as asset-based community development, could be effectively used in the design of sustainable cities. The goal was to develop a design for the integration of organic solid waste management with urban agriculture, and to do so using a community design process. This is a story about that process. It is a story about Malakas. Cagayan de Oro is a coastal city in Mindanao in the southern Philippines. It was chosen for this project for two reasons. One reason is an innovative form of urban agriculture, the allotment garden. It was introduced here in 2003 to improve food security for the urban poor.
Actually, we did a study first on urban agriculture in general, because we have these problems of urbanization. More and more people go to cities, and how to grow vegetables in the city. In the beginning, it was not easy to explain the concept of allotment gardening, because it's something new. And so after we had the first allotment garden, so that served also model then for the others to come. So it was much easier because people could see that it works.
An allotment garden is a community garden, but where parcels are cultivated individually rather than collectively. There are now 10 such gardens in Cagayan, with about 8 to 10 families gardening in each one. The gardens contribute towards improved diet, not only for the gardeners themselves, but also for their friends and neighbors. Locally conducted surveys show that only 25% of the produce is consumed by the gardeners. 7% is given to friends, and 68% is sold to local customers. Even so, for 75% of the gardeners, their vegetable consumption has doubled. As the gardeners were already familiar with composting and concepts around ecological sanitation, it was thought they would be open to the idea of integrating organic waste management with allotment gardening.
Almost 50% the waste generated that is going to the landfill is biodegradable and organic. And for the people there, it's a problem, but for us, agriculture is an asset.
It's a resource.
It's a resource. And we can convert that with appropriate technologies in organic fertilizer and a soil amendment.
Closing the nutrient loop, the alternative to conventional waste management, requires segregation of waste so the organic component can be used. This leads to the second impetus for this project, the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, This national legislation, which was passed by the Philippine Congress in 2000, is implicit recognition that conventional waste management doesn't make sense. It encourages a shift towards more sustainable practices by legislating for decentralized waste management. The Act requires segregation at source and solid waste diversion through reuse, recycling, and composting. And it assigns responsibility for these activities to local governments. In support of this legislation, the local government in Cagayan has adopted a municipal ordinance that requires districts throughout the city to establish material recovery facilities.
During the collection of garbage, at the same time, the education campaign will continue. Because one of our community organizer will bring megaphone and announce that the segregation must be at source. So the policy in the barangay is no segregation, no collections.
It was these two initiatives, the allotment garden concept and the new legislative requirements, that inspired this project in Cagayan de Oro. The objective was an urban design to illustrate how these complementary practices could be integrated. But the challenge would be how to engage the community in the design process.
I think that for me that is the only way to go. No? There were already many concepts about waste management, better waste management, waste segregation, but most of them failed because the community was not involved in the process, how the systems are designed. And therefore I think it's essential to involve also the neighboring community in a participatory process to increase the likelihood that waste segregation and reuse schemes are sustained and also effective.
The original intention had been to focus on market waste because it is essentially already segregated. But what interested the community? For a design process to be truly participatory, it is necessary to relinquish any expectations over the outcome. This also requires letting go a certain amount of control over the process, beginning with the question, who constitutes the community? At an introductory open house, 3 districts, or barangay, expressed interest in the project: Makasandig, Lapasan, and Kauswagan. 2 of them had operating allotment gardens, but none as yet had a functioning material recovery facility.
So, welcome. Ug may pagabot nato dinhi sa atong
Advice at the local level was that the entry point into the community should be through the barangay council, the elected leadership. If one were to approach the community first and then seek official support, it could be difficult to see the project implemented. But engaging the elected leadership does have consequences. It can affect how the community is defined because of decisions over the stakeholders that are included. This can affect both the process and the outcome. Informal discussions also provided valuable feedback and helped build support at various levels.
We had our composting there beside the plot of Mr. Salbanya. The community are going to throw the waste without segregating. Then we stop the implementation of the composting. All the stakeholders should participate in the implementation of the project. Not only from the implementers, but all the stakeholders, what I mean is the community itself, should participate.
The municipality showed its support for the project by establishing a technical working group comprised of experts in waste management, agriculture, environment, and public health. This raised the question, by what process should the community be engaged?
And how do you see what Sheila's presenting here as being different?
But actually, it's a process.
It's a process.
We can do that one, but the thing is, we're trying to cut short of the process.
What emerged from various discussions was the idea to adapt the community design charrette, which is the conventional method for participatory urban design, and to restructure it as a 2-stage process.
Food processing.
First, a community-wide consultation would be held in each barangay. This would garner broad-based support and generate ideas for a pilot project.
Integrated development approach.
The second stage would be more focused and limited to 7 or 8 participants from each barangay. It would be structured as a training course and design studio for this core group, who would develop the design ideas for the pilot project that their community had identified. This required consideration of the question, which approach is effective both for the community and as an urban design tool?
Well, ABCD, as I said, it's not just a methodology or a technology, it's a mindset changing, paradigm shift. And if they are looking for something that can change overnight, they cannot see it. So they have to appreciate first of all, what they have in their own selves, and then their situation. But they have to be ready for the fact that we cannot change things overnight. But it's the positive thinking that we want to inject here, instead of leaving the community and teaching children about problems. We should motivate them because they have resources.
The approach is to try to look for the assets of the community, the individuals, the organization, or the physical assets, which is the reverse of what we have done before.
Urban design is based on a similar principle. It begins by working with what exists. For this reason, it was thought that ABCD could be explored for its suitability as a tool for urban design. Community consultations were held in each barangay, Makasandig, Lapasan, and Kauswagan. After opening formalities, the process was explained.
So, ang pamagi din asset-based community development, meaning tanaw na to ang atong resources. Isa sa number 1 to resources ang tao, abilidad sa tao, ang physical asset na to, mga imarip, mga garden.
Participants were divided into small groups where they were encouraged to share what were called success stories. Any positive stories about organic waste or urban agriculture that involved an individual or group from the community.
Atong istoryahan og unsa ang mga success nga mga story dinana sa atong lugar nga naobserbahan nakita nato. Unya, kada grupo magpili og reporter og documentor.
Kasi ni Rick is mura og problema na siya, di ba? Problema. Di na lang sa nato niya, Rick. Thank you kay Rick. Pero di lang sa nato dawato na kanang katulang unsabay na himo nga pamaagi nato, at least doon na tayo mo ba?
Ako lang gisegregate. Ibutang na ako sa akong tanong mismo. Kaya pag abot ko na ako din, nananom ko mismo. Like, nanom ko mga 24 kapunuan nga, mga talang klase sa prutas na ako, gikan sa lubi, paingon sa ano, ako mismo anak nga project. Ibutang man ako sa punuan sa kuan para mahimo siya nga organic nga murag fertilizer. Basta ang least matters, imo gyud siyang ibutang dito sa punuan daw takluban para nga kanang maayo ang tubo.
After 7 days, the next step was for a member from each small group to recount these stories to the collective.
Okay. Correct gid ka, kagawad kay di kita magistorya og problema dinini kay kung magistorya magud tag problema, mura magud og makaluya nato ba unya murag bugat. So dili ta magistorya og problema, magistorya ta dinhi kung unsay naa sa ato. Okay.
Gawgyod sa mataglabay na ko dia, maugaw gi kay na dia. Pero through the effort of our very own kagawad Rumi Daabay, iya ginang gipaningkamutan nga kana dia malimpyo. Iya ganang edukar ang mga tao din og asa dapit ang lugar nga angay kalabayan sa Hugaw. Og unya dayon iya kanang gitabnan sa ornamental plant. Karon mulabay mo dia sa Tambo, dinigid sa daplin sa area ni Aberstory. Nindot kay na siya tanawon.
Natay creek.
Everyone was engaged in identifying the assets that had been used to achieve these results, whether these were people, skills, or physical assets.
So based aning atong mga story, sa nagkalain-lain nga mga storya, unsa man ang mga factors nga nakahatag og accomplishment nga nakuha nato ni nga ni-succeed gid ni siya nga kuan kani nga mga storya. Dini no nakuha nato no mao dinhi ang mga factors nga nakapahimong successful sa atong mga kasinatian. Okay, una ang cooperation from the community or total community involvement and sincere and disciplined community. Then we have the commitment, right information, sacrifice, diligence, barangay officials are active and participative, support from barangay officials.
Participants then returned to their small groups and located these assets in a mapping exercise.
Nga sticker para sa mga area nga makita nato nga bakanti. Bakanti ba siya nga area? Paya lugar ni ini o mga bakanti nga area green. Ang blue para sa mga naibasura nga makitaan. Ina lugar mga critical area din magakakitaan usually asa ga ibutang ang basura, asa ga pick up ng basura. And then ang puti mauna ang sa mga buildings, infrastructures, mga agencies, institutions, mga centers sa barangay. Unya butangan lang dayon ninyo og marka specify.
San Miguel og sa Santa Cruz ug sa Kampala.
Again, the results were reported to the collective.
Sa miaging bulan, kami nagatanom og bakhaw di sa atong daplin sa baybay.
Ubay-ubay pod ang green nga bahin. Pasabot nga as far as solid waste management is concerned, na atay mga resources diha nga magamit.
To really look forward nga 5 years gikan ka.
Out of these exercises, participants were invited to create a vision statement for their community. These diagrams illustrate that community vision statement, surrounded by the assets that the participants had identified. As can be seen here, household waste was now being identified as an asset, a resource, representing perhaps a shift in mindset. After these assets had been identified, the next step was to generate ideas for bringing them into operation in ways that would help the community achieve its vision statement.
Ang proseso man ang ginatawag nato nga linking. So ato lang siyang gisumpay-sumpay kung asa siya haom. So nahisgutan nato ni siya tanan, ato na lang dayong giplastar para sa yun ang ato ang hisgutanan. Karon ang ato ang sunod nga himuon sa gikasulti ni Nene, ang pag-mobilize nato para kining duha nga naa diri mahimo nato ni siya nga performing assets. Unsaon nato na nga magamit nato ng kaugalingon nato nga kahanas gamit aning mga physical nga resources nga nasa tuang palibot. Unsa nga mga proyekto nga pwede natong mahuna-hunaan kung ato na siyang ipagduyog, atong ipag-uban.
All of these ideas were posted onto the vision statement. Using ABCD was a new experience for the facilitators who were members of the technical working group. They were more familiar with other participatory methods.
It's a challenge to provide that learning environment for them to shift some paradigm. The only thing I always do actually in my work is I let people work and then mentor along the process. So it's a learning by doing. It's a major principle in ABCD that let people learn.
You had that chance to try the ABCD approach first in Lakasan, and then we had the session with Sheila, and then there was already some experience that you had with it.
So it's not really starting from scratch, but they started something from the process that they did based on the readings. Their own understanding, and that provide them also with the aha moment. Oh, we've done right, or these are the things that needs to be improved because it's based on experience, and that's basically the principle of ABC.
First experience was when we did the consultation in Lapasan. Is that?
Although in Lapasan it's a little bit not yet the.
The technique wasn't there yet.
The technique was not there. It's half-cooked.
There will be a lot of project ideas, and that's basically the process. It's letting the people realize that they can do something out from what they have.
Commercial man siya, oo.
And indeed, there were lots of project ideas that had to be clarified, sorted, and categorized.
Okay, mura lugar, you mean to say kanang establishment of barangay material recovery facility, MRF? Okay.
After these ideas had been categorized, it was necessary to prioritize.
Okay, doon na pa'y lain nga kuan kanang mga ipaambit. Kay kung wala atong para dili lugar sa tamalangan og ayon no. Ato ni siyang kuan sa tanan lugar sa ato nang giingon nga mo undergo ta sa process sa pag prioritize sa mga problema sa mga proyekto tungod sa kadaghan.
The next step would be to select one idea that could be developed as a pilot project.
Nga kung mag-implementa og isa, maigo ang tanan, madala ang tanan. Kinsa ang nakakita ni ana? Base dinhi. Okay, pataas kamot.
Selecting a title for the pilot project was of particular importance to participants and generated much delight.
Grabe, no? Okay, si Jovi Mantresa.
At the end of the consultations, 7 to 8 participants were to be selected from each barangay.
Ang sa barangay Lapasan.
I imagine that what will happen towards the end is that we're going to have a list of projects and we'll prioritize them.
Prioritize.
And then what I'm hoping that we can do is also somehow capture the energy from the community to select this core group that will take the training.
Yes.
And that will be able to take the project forward to implementation.
The Barangay Council of Kaswagan has already selected participants. We selected 6 of our zone leaders, and we also are working with us with the barangay health workers.
These individuals, 23 in total, would participate in the next phase of the project. They would attend the training and develop design concepts for the pilot projects that their communities had identified. The purpose of the training course was twofold. It served both as a capacity-building exercise for community-based environmental leadership and as a design studio. Accordingly, one of the first objectives was to provide participants with a basic understanding of the subject matter, principles of waste management, advantages of closing the nutrient loop, legislative requirements, compost and its use in agriculture, and the socio-economic dimensions of waste management.
So sa barangay sad karon, ilan ang gibutang sa ilang mga barangay development plans kining gas recovery facility na project ug ang allotment gardening. So wala pa ta nagplano ato pangitan-aw ang mga assets sa Cagayan. So kay dili man nato mahibaw sa ang pagplano kung di nato mahibaw sa mga assets sa Cagayan. So mong kanya ang sa una magul ang gingalan namo sa assets kay strengths of opportunities.
Exchanges with city officials helped build mutual understanding and rapport.
We are more than willing to help anyone, no, sa barangay level because solid waste is mandated man din isa sa barangay level. So sa city, no, we are more on technical assistance.
Classroom lectures were supplemented by field trips and exercises to expose participants to various methods of composting. For example, participants were required to earn a pair of gloves in a hands-on composting activity, using peelings generated by the kitchen at the Training Institute.
From the barangay hall, they will pass by to San Roque.
All of the information gained from the lectures and field trips was to serve the participants in meeting the second course objective, namely, to develop design concepts for their community pilot project. Each team was required to conduct a visual inspection and photo documentation of the pilot project site location. This data was used in the first exercise to create a base map for the pilot area and locate the assets that could be used for the project.
This area is still vacant now.
Yeah.
If you're going to pass here, this is one. This is not the road.
Existing entrance, yes.
This one. Then from this point, this serves as an entrance point for the tricycad.
Right.
Okay, for those households that can be reached by tricycad, they're just going to pass in here. Because the existing laws does not permit tricycad to go on the highway. Galing doon yung dump truck. Pabalik dito.
This exercise replicated, at the scale of the site, the ABCD approach and asset mapping that had been conducted at the scale of the barangay during the community consultations. Demanding this level of detail brought some realism to the pilot projects, and it demonstrated concrete ways to actualize the rather idealistic community vision statements.
Monday, from Bakuna Street down to...
At various stages in the process, the teams were required to present their work.
Sufficient na gikan lang diri dool gid sa among MRF. Then hopefully kung ma-realize yun or MRF has a total 8,000 square meters.
And of course, friendly rivalry helped build a healthy team spirit.
The culture, the tradition, the practices, the people. Support mechanism from Lapasan.
Participants were required to consider their plans in the broader economic and social context. How could the project become economically viable? Why not consider the markability of compost or engaging the business sector?
Organic waste is often seen to have no value, and therefore it's not segregated. However, if it's segregated, it may be of value to some end user. If it were composed, it would certainly have value.
Solicited the materials, the garbage bin from the different industries. We solicited from Del Monte, Nestle, PSC, because we have actually access to these companies because...
Identifying potential end users would be an important consideration for the economic viability of the project, with relevance for questions such as site location and proximity.
Banana plantation, then corn planters, senior citizen, kani siya mo function na siya next month pohon. Kani si senior citizen, then ang billion ornaments, kani sila, mo gid sila among target. Ang banana planters, mga 3 months siguro ni.
Another important consideration in solid waste management is its socio-economic component. How did waste pickers view this and previous initiatives? Was there a way to engage these stakeholders in the project and generate livelihood? Yet another important component that the teams had identified was the need for an information education campaign, or IEC, in their communities. There was much for the eco-aids to consider. Creating a project that is sustainable, environmentally, socially, and economically, is not easy. It requires support from all of the community, its stakeholders, and its leadership. By the end of the course, each team had developed a design concept for their pilot project. They presented their ideas for a site plan and an implementation proposal to invited guests and barangay officials.
Natin nalimtan, dini. Kaning mga litratong natong nakita, morning mga itsura sa atong pilot area.
The plans of each team were unique, reflecting the particular concerns of their own community. For example, in Lapasan, considerable focus was on household collection routes.
This MRF and these households, 150 households, are only about 20 and 100 meters in distance. Within 1 week, for our operation in waste collection, it varies for the volume.
Upon completion, all 23 participants received certification as Community Eco-Aids, and of their own volition formed Malakas. The community consultations and training course ultimately resulted in design concepts that had been generated using a participatory design process. This had required relinquishing expectations, not only about the outcome, but also about the process, to enable the communities to pursue what was in their own best interests. In Lapasan, the focus was on waste collection. To serve the very narrow streets in this barangay, household waste would be taken to collection points and picked up by tricycad, shown here in yellow. Local streets would be serviced by the barangay's truck, shown in purple, and the main highways would be serviced by the larger city vehicles, shown in red. Although these ideas have been transposed onto conventional planning maps, ultimately, the design ideas remain their own. This site plan indicates access points for the different kinds of vehicles, location of the existing allotment garden, proposal for a new garden, the material recovery facility, composting and recycling areas, and locations for vermicomposting. These garden plans indicate the importance to the community of a meeting shed, the gateway entrance, the kinds of plantings, and the integration of livestock. What will become of these design concepts? Whether the site plans designed by the Eco-Aids for their communities will ever be implemented remains unknown. Each team was required to report to their barangay council and receive approval prior to project implementation. But this would not be without some challenges. After council approval, the proposed plan was presented back to the community at a follow-up consultation. This was intended to provide the broader community an opportunity for comment and feedback. Once approved by both council and community, it was thought that project implementation could begin. But this also turned out to be a challenge in all three communities. In Lapasan and Causuagan, site access had not yet been confirmed. Eager and motivated, Malakas began project implementation with the information education campaign component of their plans. In Lapasan, Malakas replicated some of the training exercises they had learned during the course, teaching other community members how to segregate waste and how to compost organic materials. Each member of the team had a role to play. Malakas also conducted IEC in Makasandik and in Causuagan. Here the team also started a demonstration MRF and garden. While planners plan and designers design, the city will continue to be shaped by hundreds of choices made repeatedly every day by the people who live and work there. So perhaps there is another, more important lesson here for urban design and in the creation of sustainable cities.
Before, we used to have the identification of the issues and concerns of the barangays or the city. But now, because of the new tools that we've known, we do not have to talk about the issues or the problems because it's very heavy on our part and very heavy also for the participants. But then because of this ABCD, it becomes very light approach.
I've been in community organizing work for the past 29 years. The approach that we've been into is really so different. Now, I myself discuss on participatory democracy, participatory action,
organizing people, telling them about self-reliance. But I only realized that EBCD is really the vehicle for realizing the real self-reliance of people and participatory action.
The asset-based community development, or ABCD, is actually a new paradigm.
The approach is not the same as before, which is we try to assess problems. The approach is to look for the assets of the community.
I enjoy really doing community organizing, but you know, sometimes when I go home, I get home from the field, from the community, it seems that I am the ones bearing all the problems, because what we are discussing in the barangay are all the problems, frustrations, and no matter how I told them to act for self-reliance, but we couldn't find direction wherein in ABCD it's very much specified. I really enjoy ABCD. I really like it.
I have been working as a community organizer since 1980, and I have been using the traditional model, the SWOT analysis. However, I find the ABCD approach or the ABCD model very appropriate to the Philippine setting. We want to share all negative or positive stories in our lives. So that I say that would be very appropriate to our culture, considering our way of communicating with other person.
I realized the importance of ABCD when, at the time they conducted the storytelling. Yeah, that struck me most because I saw in them their enthusiasm, their sense of pride. You can call it their pride towards their achievements, because they feel like they have value.
That's why I volunteered myself to facilitate in Kauswagan, because I wanted to taste myself as regards ABCD.
I read about the ABC approach, but this is my first time. But here in the ABCD approach, all of the community or the people are involved. The barangay, the city leaders, the organization, and everybody is involved. And they have the chance to give in what they know and what they can give for the organization or for the project.
I become now an advocate for ABCD approach.
I would like to recommend this kind of approach to all agencies in the city that are involved in community organizing. Now, if only this has been introduced to us, even if 15 years ago, then people as of now might not be as they are today. I pity people who looks after politicians, and I also recommend this to planners and the officials of our country. For me, it's really a high regard for a sure kind of development that is bottoms-up development.
If not because of the ABCD, I would not be here, facilitating, practicing, because I wanted to experience how to use the ABCD as the approach in development planning.
I really feel that fulfillment right after our first consultation in Kauswagan.
Well, you were both just fabulous. You were in your realm.
And you know what? Before when we go to barangays or even the whole the citywide consultations, we felt like we have not yet done anything for the problems that the city has, or even in the barangays.
The response is much more like a celebration. It's not gloomy or something. You have someone who died.
I really thank God for giving me this kind of opportunity. So here I am now, an ABC fanatic.
The two of us are, the two of us are ABC fanatic. You know what?
Well, isn't that great? What dedicated people we have working here, and there you've heard it. ABCD approach is the way to go, and it's appropriate for urban planning.